Hello, welcome back to the channel. My name is Lisa Elvin Stoltari, and I am a genealogist and a passionate traveler. Over the last year or so, I've been featuring each fille du roi or king's daughter and getting to know their stories a little bit better. There are over 700 of them, so we've got a long way to go. Today we're featuring Francoise Moisan, episode 137. But before we begin, I want to show you how you can support the channel. The first three keep you in the know. Subscribe, like, and notify. Then the next three are ways to help the channel grow. We have Ko-fi, Etsy, and Patreon. All are ways of showing your support. I have included the links below so that you can get to know those sources as well. So let's get to know our fille du roi of this episode. So Francoise Moisan was not requested by any viewer. I do not have her in my files. The only way she came to the surface is from the previous video I just did with Pierre Pertius, who remarried Francoise Moisan. I said, who is this person? What a story. So I had to tell it. So let's get started, shall we? So Francoise was born in 1645 in La Rochelle, France, a very, very prominent place. The region of where La Rochelle is found is Nouvelle-Aquitaine, and the department is Charente-Maritime. So you can see the region of France, and then you can see circled within that the upper part of Nouvelle-Aquitaine. La Rochelle itself is, a very prominent city, and it was founded during the 10th century and became an important harbor in the 12th. Until the 15th, La Rochelle was to be the largest French harbor on the Atlantic coast, dealing mainly in wine, salt, and cheese. I love that so many of my people came from this area because I love wine, salt, and cheese. The name was first recorded in 961 as Rupella, from a Latin diminutive meaning little rock. La Rochelle has one of the richest histories of all the towns of France, from its beginnings as an area where the Knights of Templar had their strongest base. Eleanor of Aquitaine married Henry Plantagenet in 1152, who would become King of England as Henry II in 1154, thus putting La Rochelle under Plantagenet or British rule, until Louis VIII captured it in the 1224 siege of La Rochelle. During the Plantagenet control of the city in 1185, Henry II had the Vauclair castle built, remains of which are still visible in the Place de Verdun. From 1568, La Rochelle became a center for the Huguenots. It was in La Rochelle that a Protestant revolt occurred and created the uprising that would become known as the siege, the Second Siege of La Rochelle. Throughout the 1600s, Huguenots were expelled from La Rochelle. So one of the things we look at when we're doing genealogy is if they're coming from La Rochelle, is this an indication they may have been Protestant and fleeing persecution in France? It's possible. So I always look at that. I have no evidence to suggest that Francoise was Huguenot. I just know that this is her area. And here's another thing that I look at. When they are on that first boat, June 30th, 1663, Le Phoenix de Flange, that is another indication to me, or another hint, a clue, maybe, that they could be fleeing on some level. This was the beginning of Les Filles du Roi. This is the very first ship that arrived in New France. And there are several other cases that I've seen of Huguenots. So just an interesting tidbit. The groom that she selected and who selected her, his name was Antoine Brunet de Bellumeur, which I love that name because Bellumeur means good humor. He was born in 1644, also in La Rochelle, in the Saint Nicolas parish. His parents were Maitre Brunet and Marie Brunet. It is possible that they just had the same name. That happens a lot in my family as well. So don't know if there was a second or third cousin or that. Remember, if they're Catholic, they could not have been first cousins. That we know. Not legally anyway. So Antoine and Francoise were married November 28, 1663. This is their marriage record. They were married in Montreal. So let's have a look at what kind of family did they create. So they would settle in Montreal. Let's talk a little bit about this wonderful city that started off as Ville-Marie and became Montreal. The founder, Pierre de Chaumédy, Sire de Maisonneuve, was essentially the man. He founded it in 1642, essentially as a missionary center. The colony would not thrive, and it was kind of like a joke with Three Rivers and Quebec City. They kind of shook their heads and said, "What is this place? On an island somewhere. Who's going to go and live there?" And it was on the verge of extinction when, he basically went back to France and said, "Please, I need at least 100." And this became known as La Grande Recrue. And so these would be the founders of Montreal, including Marguerite Bourgeois, who we've looked at many a time, who founded the Notre Dame congregation. These colonists were immediately confronted by some of the most fearsome native fighters, the Iroquois. And there was no regular army. So in 1663, Maisonneuve created the Sainte-Famille militia to protect Ville-Marie. And it was made up of about 139 volunteer colonists. And then, that's how they did it until the military were able to come in and secure and create forts and all of that. But this was a very, very, dangerous place, you would call it. So to go to Montreal during this time, this sets the stage. I mean, this is what Antoine and Francoise were living through. So Antoine was 36. Francoise was 35 by 1681. This is their the census. By then, their children were Marie, 15, Catherine, 13, Elizabeth and Geneviève, who were twins. So that's, I think, one of the first twins we've seen. 7 years old. Marguerite was 3, and Francois was 17 months. They had 1 gun. They had 5 goats, and they had 17 arpents, which is about 13 to 14 acres of land. Pretty remarkable, actually. So let's have a look at the family that they built. Their first child, Francois, you'll note, was not in that 1681 census. He was already married. He had married Anne Menard and had 6 children, all of whom made it to adulthood. Marie-Françoise married Jean Patineau and had 2 children, one of whom made it to adulthood before her untimely death at 19 years of age. Catherine married Pierre Patineau, the brother of Jean, and had 6 children, all of whom made it to adulthood. We have Antoine, who died at birth. Geneviève married Louis Tétrault, with whom she did not have any children, and then she married Louis Barrault, with whom she had 1 child. Elizabeth herself would pass away at the age of 32. Geneviève would marry Robert Réaume and have 7 children, all of whom made it to adulthood. Marguerite would marry Jacques Tétrault and have 8 children, all of whom made it to adulthood. The remaining 3 children, I do not have any information. I'm assuming they died at birth. It is extremely possible. So I love exploring these kind of women. Françoise would obviously not obey the rules of the time. She would be accused of living a life of promiscuity, possibly prostitution. By 1688, she was charged with keeping lovers and also seducing others to come to her home. Again, this is through the filter of 16th, 17th century, what they were accusing her, and what we might say, hey, she was just, a free-spirited, loving woman. So we don't know. So we have to reserve judgment. I always do whenever I'm looking. I never try to judge any historical because I don't know the context. Her husband, Antoine, would pass away sometime between 1688 and 1695. He was buried at Notre Dame as well. And here comes her second husband, Pierre Pertus, that we looked at in episode 136. And we'll just go over some of the information. Born in 1643 in Amboise, which is in the Centre Val de Loire region of France. And it is in the Indre-et-Loire section. And I'm just seeing that my circle is not in the right place. The Indre-et-Loire is on the left hand. Just seeing that it moves. Somehow it moves. He was baptized at the Saint Denis Church, which was begun about 11th century by Hugues, the first lord of Amboise. It was built on the site of the ancient Gallo-Roman monuments. It was remodeled in the 16th century, and Amboise itself as a community dates from the 5th century. So this is a place of true history, this is absolutely a beautiful, beautiful place that you and I need to visit. So this was a second marriage for both of them. Pierre had recently lost Claude, his wife, and Francoise had lost Antoine. So they were married February 13th, 1707. So this is not a marriage out of, need financially or anything like that. This was, I suspect, companionship, passion, all the above. So Pierre would pass away only 18 months later in 1708. He is presumably buried. I do not have a death record for him. He's presumably buried with Claude, his first wife. Francoise would die at the age of 73 on November 2nd, 1718, and she is buried at Contrecoeur. She presumably was living with a family member. By 1729, the descendants of Francoise and Antoine would account for an astonishing 130 descendants. Here are some of my top 6 resources. La Société des Filles du Roi. Think about joining it if you want to, really delve into your Filles du Roi ancestry. They also give you a really beautiful certificate for framing. It's a wonderful gift as well. So we have number 2 is Quebec Genealogical E-Society, Nos Origines, Généalogie Québec. Number 5, Migration. Let's talk a little bit today about Migration. Migration is a free website that volunteers have been doing for years, really combing through every single Filles du Roi. I use it constantly. It is a free site, but I do donate from time to time just to show my appreciation. And then we have Facebook, Filles du Roi Descendants as well, a wonderful place for, kind of meeting cousins, if you will. So check those out. I have the links in the notes. And with that, we end episode 137, Francoise Moisan. She did not fit the profile of this, weak and victim kind of, subservient, I would say, woman. She definitely was a woman ahead of her time and played by her own rules. And I have to say, I admire her no matter what. I think she was remarkable, and I thank her, and we thank her for her contribution. She does have 130 descendants, as of 1729. I'm very fascinated to know who can claim her as a descendant, because you really have a remarkable woman as a great-grandmother. So with that, I leave you, and I say au revoir until I see you on episode 138.